So hello to everyone who's on the line with us today. Thank you for joining us for the first webinar in the Cancer Collaborative's HTA engagement webinar series. These webinars will provide a resource platform that engages with stakeholders and encourages better informed HTA participation, create a better understanding of what is required from patient organizations to create meaningful engagement with HTA and how to deliver it, how to create meaningful dialogue with patient organizations and clinicians to understand their gaps and limitations, and provide resources to meet those needs and create a global community to pool resources to create valuable patient submissions. In this series, we're going to look at how we can create more consistent and meaningful engagement with patient organizations and clinicians through the HTA process so that health policies are patient-focused and seek to achieve best value as defined by all stakeholders. My name is Sabrina Hanna, and I'm the Managing Director of the Cancer Collaborative, and I'm happy to have alongside me Sarah Berglass from CADTH and Isabelle Ganache and Olivier Demers-Payette from INESSS. Thank you to everyone who's joined us on the line. We have a good mix of Canadian and European participants, and thank you to Sarah, Isabelle, and Olivier for agreeing to participate. I'm just going to do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then I will give the control over to them to let them speak to you. So Sarah Berglass is Manager Patient Engagement at CADTH. Sarah runs the patient engagement team at CADTH. Sarah and her team work with 170 patient groups and many individuals to gather, share, and integrate lived experiences, hopes, and needs into value assessments of medical devices, procedures, and drugs. Sarah articulated CADTH's patient engagement framework in 2018 and led the creation of the agency's first patient and community advisory committee in 2019. She contributes to organizational change to meaningfully support diverse patients and community voices in CADTH's work. A member of HTAI's Patient and Citizen Interest Group, and is it INADA's Patient Engagement Learning Group, Sarah?
Yeah. Yes, the INADA.
INADA, and Sarah shares approaches and continues to learn. Prior to joining CADTH in 2018, Sarah worked in healthcare public relations in the UK. She holds a BA and BSc from Monash University in Australia and diploma in public policy and program evaluation from Carleton University in Ottawa. Isabelle Ganache, PhD, Senior Scientist, Ethics and Coordinator, Methodology, Ethics and Citizen, Patient User, and Caregiver Participation at INESSS. Isabelle Ganache holds a master's degree in molecular biology and completed a doctorate in bioethics at the Université de Montréal in 2006. She then turned her attention to the integration of ethics at HTA in a postdoctoral project in support of genetic policies. At the Commission de la Santé et du Bien-être, she participated in the evaluation of the health and social services system's performance and operationalize the vision of ethics relating to citizen and stakeholder participation. As a member and the chair of ethics committees from 2002 to 2014, she has expertise in responsible research conduct. Since 2012, she has been an assistant clinical professor in the Université de Montréal's bioethics programs. Before assuming the position of senior scientist ethics at INESSS, she was a member of its Standing Scientific Committee on Health and Social Services. Since April 2017, she has been the scientific coordinator of the Methods, Ethics, and Participation Unit of the Vice Presidency, Science and Clinical Governance. Olivier Demers-Payette, PhD, Scientific Professional Methodology at INESSS, holds a PhD in public health from the Université de Montréal and previously completed a bachelor's degree in science, technology, and society with specialization in political science from UQAM and a master's degree in health sciences administration from the Université de Montréal. After his doctoral studies, Olivier worked in citizen participation in the development of public health policies. In 2017-2018, he held the Canadian Institutes of Health Research Health System Impact postdoctoral fellowship. Over the past 2 years, he has held various responsibilities in the methodology, ethics, and participation unit at INESSS as a methodology professional. So there is time at the end of this webinar for discussion and questions. In order to ask the questions, you've got an icon, a Q&A icon on your screen, so you can enter those questions there. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. So if we jump to, let's see, my first slide. And so thank you for the introduction. To tell you a little bit, introduce CADTH. CADTH is a health technology assessment body, which means that we provide assessments of medical devices, procedures, and drugs. Technology doesn't necessarily mean telephone apps, cell apps, and computers. We do these assessments to help hospitals, health authorities, health ministries, public plans across Canada, with the exclusion of Quebec, to be able to help them make wise and equitable decisions about which drugs and devices to use, so that they're able to provide excellent care at a sustainable cost. Care today, as well as care for our children and grandchildren. So we have a number of different ways that we involve patients, patient groups, clinicians, clinician groups, different organizations in CADTH's work. And as our assessments kind of vary in terms of their timeframes and their objectives, so too do the different opportunities for involvement. We're trying to be quite pragmatic about when and how we seek different insights so that they make the most value. So I'm going to highlight a few different opportunities, and we've spread this out over the using the spectrum of public participation, which perhaps is well known to people. It's developed by the International Association for Public Participation. So I've also included there the link on our website where we have all of this detailed, as well as some of our other frameworks as to the why involve patients, or and some of that theoretical understanding as well. But we have details in terms of opportunities for involvement, as well as considerations and the impact of that involvement. So I'm going to start with inform and work my way to empower, with each step being greater levels of engagement and, of course, resource, time, and impact. So next slide. If we start with inform, and on the right there, it gives a sense of the volume of the work that CADTH does in a year. So we do about 300 to 350 rapid responses. And this may be an evidence search on behalf of a health authority, a hospital, a health ministry, or it may be an evidence search plus a critique of that evidence, a summary of that evidence, a summary that's critiqued. And so that information is used by the health authorities and hospitals to be able to make policy decisions. They may be decisions on which technologies to use, to reimburse. It may be informing some of the clinical use in that hospital, in that setting. So we do that for health authorities and hospitals all across Canada outside of Quebec. And last month, just to get a sense of what sort of questions we're looking at, we looked at different options for chronic pain, options such as drugs, but also options such as exercise, acupuncture. We looked at safety needles for insulin pens. We looked at the use of medical cannabis in palliative care. So all of those are questions that come from a hospital health authority that we research. But CADTH provides all of our answers up on our website for this year as well as years gone past. So oftentimes individuals will come across CADTH through Googling a technique, a drug, a device, and seeing CADTH's name through the rapid responses. So we do encourage anybody who's interested to look up questions, look up the disease area of interest, to read those responses and to be able to share them with a doctor or share them with other members of their organization to see what the state of the evidence is and how rigorous that evidence is. In a year, we also do 60 to 70 drug assessments. We do 20 or so horizon or environmental scans and about a dozen other large health technology assessments. Unlike the rapid responses, which are done within a couple of weeks, our drug assessments, we usually have those completed within 6 months. Our larger health technology assessments, we might spend sort of 9 months to 18 months working on those projects. So the opportunities for involvement are different, and I'll highlight that a little later on. Next slide. So people who subscribe, and I've indicated the link below how to subscribe to this, will be alerted to opportunities for stakeholder feedback. So that's feedback. It could be on different things. It could be on potential process changes, or it could be on one of those large projects I identified. We're looking for people to comment on the scope of that project. Are we asking the right research question? Are we looking in the right places? Then also an opportunity to comment on the draft science report, and sometimes on the draft recommendations. And for the stakeholder feedback, that can come from anybody. It can come from health professionals, it can come from individual patients or patient groups, it can come from academics, universities, it can come from professional associations, and the companies that make and invent and manufacture medical drugs and devices. Anybody who's interested. Next slide. Here we go. So we're moving along that spectrum now in terms of getting involved, and our sense of involvement is really being a member, participating in shaping that direction of the conversation, not just reacting to it. So I would say one of the best opportunities for involvement is our CADTH symposium, and we hold this every year. In 2020, it's going to be in Toronto in April. And we move from different parts of the country in Canada to allow different groups to be able to take part easily. We have about 750 people attend each year, and that's a mix of patients, patient groups, clinicians, health policy, people in health authorities and health ministries who are making health policy, as well as health technology assessment agencies, universities, researchers, and students. And to be able to support that kind of diverse group of people coming together, CADTH does provide travel grants. We do about 25 travel grants for patients and patient groups to be involved, as well as a similar number for students. And we kind of go out of our way through webinars and reminders and encouragement to get patients and patient groups and clinicians to submit abstracts, to be involved in panels, but also to be part of our abstract review committee to help shape that scientific program. What should we be considering, as well as participating in the audience, and especially on social media. That's a great way to be able to comment and get conversations going. So our Twitter feed at the symposium is always really buzzing, and patients and patient groups are very, very a healthy part of that. If we move to the next slide. So patient input into CADTH's drug reviews are probably our best known way of engagement of patients and clinicians at CADTH. I'm highlighting here the different ways that patient input is used for both the Common Drug Review and the Pan-Canadian Oncology Drug Review. Patient groups provide input rather than individuals. There's a call for patient input. Groups have 35 days to be able to prepare a written submission. And when that comes into CADTH, it's used in a range of different ways. So it's consistently reported in the stakeholder engagement, but it's also quite importantly used in that PICO, the protocol. So we have the population intervention comparator outcomes. So it's those outcomes that we often get from patient input and clinician input, or from our conversations with clinicians. Are the drug trials part of the evidence for that drug review, looking at the outcomes that are meaningful to patients and are meaningful for clinicians? And then as the evidence from those clinical trials is really teased apart, you know, does this make sense? Is it got strong internal validity, which is able to be examined, but also external validity? How might that trial situation work in a Canadian healthcare setting? And here, insights from Canadian clinicians and Canadian patients with lived experience is so important to be able to understand, well, what we saw in the trial, will we see that here in Canada? Oftentimes, the same input is used to be able to critique the economic models that are looked at. Again, are the right parameters in there? How does that relate to our experience here in Canada? And with both of these, you know, we trying to make sure that if, say, patients and clinicians are telling us fatigue is one of the most important outcomes, if reducing the frequency of exacerbations is one of the most outcomes, or the number of weeks to remain alive and well enough to interact with family is one of the most important outcomes, then we can follow those outcomes in the trials. And if those outcomes were captured in the trials, and unfortunately many times they're not, but if they are and they're reported and they show improvement to the comparator, we know not only does this drug work, but it works in a way that is going to have a meaningful improvement to maintaining or improving the health of those who are receiving the drug. And of course, the patient input and clinician input is an important part of the expert committee deliberations. We will sometimes involve clinician panels, and we have on our committees patient and public members who voice the patient input that was received, as well as involving practicing clinicians who we contract to be involved there on the call and contributing to those discussions. CADTH does have at least one clinician in every one of our drug reviews that we contract to be involved throughout it, as well as when we have clinician input in our oncology space or when we involve clinical panels. So we'll move along to collaborate. So this is more some of our larger assessments where we, instead of trying to have answers within 6 months, we're taking a longer, more detailed, and sometimes broader look at a collection of therapies, or say something like kidney dialysis. How does that vary from being in center or in people's homes versus in a specialized unit for that? So in those ones, we work with individuals to help us understand the evidence. But instead of asking for patient input, what we usually do is we go to the literature and do a qualitative literature review of perspectives. Oftentimes these are patient or lived experience perspectives, but we're increasingly looking now to do broader perspectives. So perhaps that's clinician perspectives as well as patient perspectives, or nurse perspectives, or social worker perspectives. We do have clinicians involved all the way through this, and we increasingly will work with individual patients with lived experience to help us understand, well, what are the themes that are most important coming out of the literature? How do they feed into that protocol? And earlier on, that protocol, are we looking at the right things? Are we looking at the right outcomes? Are we asking the right questions? And then as we get into it, are we are the right themes coming from the literature? How does that fit in to the clinical trial information? And how are we communicating that as we're writing our reports? So the involvement will vary from project to project, and that is all detailed in the protocol and also in the methods sections of those completed assessments. Another example of collaboration that we have, and we've just started, is our Patient and Community Advisory Committee. And that is a committee that is working to be more of a collaborative model in terms of CADTH governance. So we have more details on our website about who's on that committee, but those are individuals from across Canada who bring their own experiences. They do not represent any region of Canada or any disease area or any disease group, but they're people who are immensely qualified in terms of both their professional careers and their lived experiences and their connections, and they help CADTH as we look at how we can better understand the needs of those who use the healthcare system for anything that falls under CADTH's mandate. So rather than being involved in direct assessments, they are looking more at the broader level of the work that CADTH does and how do we ensure that we are keeping in mind what is important to patients and communities as we develop our future strategic plans and our future directions. Move along to empower. So this is kind of in the far right of that spectrum, and these are the people who are, the voices at the table, who is there involved at decision making. Although it's recommendations that are provided, this is kind of the top level of involvement. So each of our committees has either a patient member or a public member who are on them, who are full members of that committee with full voting rights, receiving honorarium, recruited in the same sort of rigorous way. And their roles is to be able to give voice to the patient perspectives that are gathered through the reviews, to make sure that the evidence that is being examined, does it align with what patients are seeking, what are their needs, and also in these committees, in addition to our patient and public member, we have a whole range of different clinical expertise, as well as methodology expertise, as well as health economic expertise. So you have people with a whole bunch of different perspectives there, challenging assumptions, pulling apart evidence, deliberating on elements to be able to come to a conclusion. So if we move to the last one in terms of kind of next steps and development, we do a whole range of different things, but there's certainly other things that we can do differently. We can do we can do better. Last fall, we had quite a broad listening exercise with many of the patient groups who regularly contribute to CADTH. And part of the purpose of this was for us to be able to develop those terms of reference for our patient and community advisory group. But it was also an excellent chance to be able to hear, well, how is engagement going? How could we do it differently? How could you be supported better? And so we heard from that need for respectful engagement, but also that diversity, and looking for ways to be able to engage more. How do we move perhaps more from involvement towards collaboration, as well as having that demonstrated? And in terms of support, there was certainly a very, pretty much in every conversation, people were very happy to be receiving travel awards, but looking for more support in terms of the burden of doing patient input submissions and trying to get that breadth of times when we ask for assessments, as well as being able to help do some of that education so that patient groups, as they're reaching out to their members, aren't having to do that basic education of, well, who is CADTH? So we are slowly working on these different elements here. With the advisory committee, we're working on some of that diversity and looking to be respectful. As we're making changes to CADTH, we're looking at how can we be have greater interaction as well as support. And some of this may be looking at how we've been doing things in the last number of years. How can we do that differently to both understand when the input makes the most difference, as well as where times we can perhaps be reducing burdens, so that rather than doing additional surveys, it's a matter of the same survey is good, let's explore this element here in a more collaborative sort of way. So I'm going to pause there and make sure INESSS have a chance to give their talk, and I will be here to answer questions at the end.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much, Sabrina, for this opportunity. We are at the MEP, Methodology, Ethics and Participation Unit at INESSS, really dedicated to increase patient participation in the evaluation process of INESSS, and are really happy to have the opportunity to dialogue like today with CADTH and with everybody. Special thanks also to Marie-Pascale Pomé, who is right here, a medical consultant for INESSS. She's the initiator of several activities at INESSS involving patients, and also in particularly involving patient organization. This is the specific subject we will focus during our presentation. Thanks also to all the MEP unit members, professionals, caregiver partner we have here, Louis, and other INESSS staff members who are involving patients in their evaluation with a lot of enthusiasm and of course with challenges, and that's how we try to evaluate and in that direction. So next slide, please. A lot of what Sarah described for CADTH is true also for INESSS. INESSS is the HTA organization, health technology assessment for the province of Quebec. So we do drug evaluation, we do health technology and organization evaluation, and also social services evaluation. And the different steps here, you can see an institutional framework we are in the process of adopting, describing our principal main steps for evaluation. So and I guess the same process can go forward for CADTH too, even if it's not described exactly in the same way. And at each step, we have opportunity to involve stakeholder in different and a variety of manner. More specifically, the principle to knowledge mobilization and integration give us an opportunity to involve people, and we recruit, we interview, we do focus group, expert committee, and we have individual patient, of course, individual clinician, manager, ethicist, but also patient and patient representatives. We try to engage them at that stage of the evaluation. Olivier, a little later, will present you examples of that. We also think that the principle 5 is a really important one to engage with patient association to support the creation of value in the real world context when we do recommend something, when patient association take them and use them, that can be a big way to change practice in better ways. So I think this should be a focus of further work. Also, we would like to involve further stakeholder and ameliorate our process for prioritization of subject. We are in the process of creating a table de concertation. I don't know how to translate that. Table of consultation, including different stakeholders. And we are proposing right now the idea to have five-person individual patient and citizens on that table of 15 people. So in the next year, we should see that create for INESSS. And during this process, we also hope to create annual meeting with patient representatives and annual meeting with clinician representatives too. So this is for the probably next few years. Next slide, please.
Okay, so what we see here is that, as Isabelle said before, we involve many stakeholders. We have clinicians, health managers, policymakers, researchers, pharmaceutical industry, and so far. But what we are interested to share with you today is that we also have a diversity of stakeholders that matters for you. It's that patients, caregivers, patient user representative, and also citizens. And we distinguish those different roles from many aspects. And what we see in that kind of diversity of roles is that they have a specific contribution for all. They have specific advisory or advocacy role and so far. So what we try here to do at INESSS, it's to really see in which way each stakeholders could be involved in a specific project, and to see what's the added value for each for a specific project. So it's kind of a diversification of different role here, but it's to better engage with them inside our HTA project, and also at more a higher level here at INESSS inside a specific committee or a scientific committee that we have in our organization. So next slide, please. So as Sarah said and present the different level of involvement, here at INESSS, we also have reflection around that, kind of a level of participation and engagement with those stakeholders said before. But we try to see how they complement each other. We don't see it specifically on a level, a scale, a specific scale, but on different way where we can engage with those patient representative and so far. So we have the consultation part where we try to through surveys, interviews, focus group, and so far really gather some the views, perspective, experience around a specific condition or a specific devices or drugs. And we also have the collaboration where the patient or patient representative will be on specific committee that will follow the project during its lifespan. We also have a partnership that we try to develop here at INESSS, and we have some projects that have patient partners where they are involved in the project team and co-construct some of the aspect of the project and how we address the evaluation question and so far. And we also have deliberation where we find more citizens on that. It's a scientific committee that will decide and will decide of the recommendation from each evaluation project. So we have that kind of different level of participation that we tend to see as a complementary way to engage with patient and also patient representative. But we mostly find patient representative during consultation and collaboration here at INESSS. Next slide, please.
Here is the slide to represent the idea that it is important for INESSS to make a responsible management of interest and conflict of interest and roles. We think that when we do not do this management right, it can undermine the credibility and integrity of our recommendations and our work in general. and also that of the actors involved, clinicians, patients, or their representatives. And it can also have consequences for patients in general. So we think we have to manage that, these conflict of interest and conflict of roles in proportion to their severity. And we are using the level of participation to try to do this management. Here is the presentation of patient groups where they can participate relating to the conflict of interest or roles they have declared. But it is important to know that it is true for everyone at INESSS, every collaborators, clinicians, managers, ethicists, whatever, everybody. And also we just, the board just adopted a new policies, in fact, one for the collaborators and another for staff member at INESSS. So the idea is this responsible management of interest, it's for everybody, not only for patients or patient representatives, it's for everybody. But here we try to illustrate the fact that when we consult, the conflict of interest, they have to be declared, but we consult people with conflict of interest, financial or not, whatever. We think everybody we have to consult everybody, even if they have a conflict of interest. In collaboration, we try to avoid direct financial interest, people with direct financial interest. And in deliberation and partnership, we exclude people or organizations that have financial interest. Conflict of missions, sometimes we can see in missions of different organizations that the mission is conflicting. So we won't put representative of organization in deliberation or partnership when the mission conflict. Also, we are looking at lobbying, advocacy, public opinion expressed, and or public statement on the HTA topic. Next slide. Here is a general portrait of our participation activities, patient participation activity, I have to say, because I think in every products with recommendations, we have people participating, stakeholder participating to their formulation. But we have here information on the patient participation during the last year, 18 and 19. So on 22 products with recommendations, we had 9 of them, including the perspective of patients, users, caregivers, or citizens. We had the 64 patients, users, caregivers, or citizens involved in interviews or focus group. Many more in surveys, many more had completed the formularies, and we also do a literature review on their perspective. So this is only the people that were interviewed or participated in focus group. In a few projects, we also had patient organization directly or indirectly involved. And we do a satisfaction survey, and we can see that people responding to our survey are quite happy with their participation, with all the limits, of course, of this kind of survey can present. Next slide.
So what we just see is that it's growing at INESSS, the patient engagement inside our activities. It's quite new for us. It's quite new for us to engage also with patient organization, but we think that we are in the right orientation here, and we focus on that specific to foster that specific engagement. So what we see here is I will present 3 examples of how we involved how you could be involved at INESSS. For example, we have an online questionnaire for all the drugs review that we do at INESSS. So you have the specific link here. It's a quick questionnaire of 4 pages that quite similar, I think, that the one that CADTH use. It's in French, but it's really focused where to, we have in English too, sorry. It's really focused to gather information about the condition, about also the current services, the current treatment, and also the view on the drugs that are reviewed. So we have that kind of online way to be involved in our HTA project around drugs. Next slide, please. This is an example of an HTA project that was published last year. So it was about the CAR-T cell, CAR-T cell drugs around leukemia for treatment for a specific leukemia. It's in this example, what we did is to mobilize the experiential knowledge and perspective of patient, but we also have a patient representative involved in this project. So the patient association were mainly involved in recruitment. They share our call for applications to seek for patient to answer an online survey for us. So they have that kind of a interface with where they share our call for surveys and application. They also participate inside a focus group that we held for gathering their perspective on the drugs and also on the condition and the services that they receive. And we also they share with us some data that they gather from surveys, homemade surveys from them. So we have the opportunity to use their data for our project here. So next slide. It's just an example, another example of another project. We work with where we work with the patient representative. It's for Lyme disease. It's also a project that was published last year. So we try here to it's the same way to gather information around the condition, the services, and how they see the diagnosis and the treatment of this particular disease that is growing in our country. So we have a focus group with the patient representative, and we also have, in fact, this was focus groups. So we held two meetings with them. One was specifically to gather some their knowledge and their perspective on the illness and how the system, the health services system helped them and so far. The problem with also the health system. So we meet them sometimes, and also we have two patient partners inside this project. But what's interesting for patient representative is that they were involved in the development of all the knowledge transfer tools that was that target patients, but also the clinician patient encounters and so far. So we mobilize them for specific key tools in this project. Next slide. So it's a quick glimpse of what we do at INESSS. It's surely short because we have many projects currently in works here. But what we see is that we, as for opportunity for INESSS, is that we have a strong commitment from the top level management, but also from our strategic plan and all other organizational strategic document and so far. So we have a really strong commitment towards patient engagement, and that's really important for us. We have a really buy-on on that necessity, and that it's really helping us to develop patient participation inside our projects, but also at other level at INESSS. It's really interesting because we try to diversify, as you've seen, the different stakeholders. So when we try to diversify that and to really see which group could be involved, we see many opportunities to involve them in the project. So we try to really engage with that, with many kind of patient participants and also patient organization in different level, in different modalities. We try to see what fits well with each project, and we really try to be reflexive about that. We also, as Isabelle mentioned, we foster a responsible management of interest to really see and manage the conflict of interest and conflict of roles from each stakeholder, not specifically for a patient, but for all stakeholders, and that help us also to see in which way we could be involved with patient organization and so far. Other things that we see here, but I think that I will switch to the next slide to really give us time to discuss with you. Some challenges that we have here at INESSS. One challenge is that we try hard to build capacity here at INESSS, so to have people that know how to engage with patients, but also how to recruit, collect data and analyze data that is from qualitative or mix or participatory research focus. So it's in development here at INESSS, but we are at the beginning of that. One thing that is maybe more important here for us, that for the discussion around patient organization involvement in HTA, is that we need to establish trust and mutual understanding with patient association. It's not a matter of just to know each other, but to give us time, and it's a relationship that need to be developed in time. So we need to have our teams that year to know which organizations are in this specific domain, like for cancer, like for cardiology, like for transplantation, and many domains where we have some involvement at INESSS. So we need to foster that kind of trust and mutual understanding to really see how we could work together in our specific timeline and specific constraint too. We have a wide, just here in Quebec, but I think it's the same everywhere, but you have a wide variety of association. So you have small association, big association. You have association that are focused on more the advocacy role. We have associations that are doing a diversity of role, like fundraising, like research, and so far. So it's kind of difficult to really know the portrait and really know the situation of all association, and to establish an effective communication with them. So it's kind of something that we find challenging here, and also we need to be more focused on fostering a diversity of voices around our projects. We know that some groups are more represented in project than other. We need to be really really focused on and really sensitive to this kind of issue. And you have also work we have to do is on the all the training, the document that we have. It's really expert focused. So how we translate those focus and how we train or offer some opportunity to know how to engage with us. For example, that webinar is kind of a opportunity for us, but it's how we explain how we explain our project and how we explain how to be involved in that project and to participate meaningfully inside those projects. So it's some kind of challenges that we have here at INESSS.
Again, thank you for this webinar series. And I'd like to stress the importance of stakeholder participation in general, but of patient participation and their representative more specifically for INESSS, and the idea that we are committed to an evolution in this matter.
Thanks.
So thank you to all three of you for that information. I'm going to start off the questions just to give people some time to send their questions in. When we actually discussed in preparing for this, we talked about the challenges and the limitations of engaging with patient groups. And Olivier and Isabelle, you brought up a really interesting point about sometimes you don't even know how to reach these patient groups. So, you know, in terms of that, how do you think that how do you fix those issues? How do you want to hear from patient groups? You know, we haven't always had this sort of open communication with HTA in Canada and in Quebec. So how do we build that engagement, that collaboration with HTA?
In many ways, I think. Many ways. If we focus only on one ways, I think we will miss the boat. So I think that's what we need to see is that for the organization, we need a specific kind of table, and Isabelle said before the table de concertation, like consultation table, but also statutory meeting with the patient organization. So it's kind of way, it's a way to engage with, to reach patient group and to be, to begin to understand each other better. So it's a specific way, but for the organization to reach out a patient group. But we also need to foster this inside specific evaluation project. And we have units that only work, for example, in cardiology. We have units that work for drugs. We have units that work in specific health domain. And so they have kind of a special connection that they could have with patient organization, but it's not it's something on the long term, medium and long term. For example, if a HTA project give us an opportunity to reach out those patient group, it would be interesting to begin a conversation and to see each other as a collaborator inside a project in many ways.
I'd like to add something about one of many things Marie-Pascale here give us the impulse to do. We try to list in a kind of repertoire the patient association in the provincial one in Quebec, at least to see what would be the portrait of these patient association. So it's not, I would say it's an unfinished business, but at least we have a list, and we have a basis to look if there are others or everything or anything like that. So this is a way to try to see the whole portrait. But we face challenges when we try to reach them sometimes, because for example, two examples of that. The website of the patient organization are not necessarily up to date. So the contact information sometimes doesn't work. So just to reach people, sometimes it's really long. So, and we have in HTA process, sometimes we have really short timeline to produce the recommendation when we have to do. So these precious weeks trying to reach people is really challenging for us. Also, and patient organization also have their timeline and their activities, of course. But once we try to reach Cancer Patient Association, but it was the month of the cancer awareness or something like that. So they couldn't give us time at that moment. So what do we do in this situation when we have to produce our recommendation? We'd like to collaborate, but it's not necessarily always possible. So. Yeah.
So I do have a question regarding and it's for INESSS specifically. You talked about the table de concertation, so the roundtable, and the question is if this is going to be specific for patient groups.
The roundtable is right now is designed. It is in. We are working on the règlement, the rules for the composition and how it will work. And at the moment, we are aiming to the composition of this table is on individual persons. So no representative, but no patient representative, but no clinician representative either, or a manager representative. So we will try to use a diversification strategy to, we probably will have a recruitment process asking for people who want to participate, and then select individual people in a diversification process. But because it is individual people, we thought that creating this roundtable, we should also create an opportunity for representative clinician and patient association to interact with us. So this is why we thought we'd do the roundtable with individual, but we should also do an annual meeting with a patient representative and an annual meeting with the clinician representative, as we do annual meetings with drug manufacturer.
I've got another question here. As a patient organization, when we submit the patient input response into the PCODER process, this is often a one-way transmission of information. CADTH does not provide feedback to the patient organizations on their response. We don't know if it meets their needs, if it answers questions they have, or if they find it valuable. Receiving feedback on the patient input response could create a rich conversation that could be beneficial to the patient organizations and CADTH. Is this something that would be considered by CADTH and also by INESSS?
Perhaps I can start there from CADTH. So we do, at the moment, that is correct. For our common drug review, when patient groups provide input, we do have a closed loop in terms of providing written thank you letters back to the group. And to create those thank you letters, it's not a generic thank you letter, it's tailored. We call them thank you feedback letters, because we trace ideas that came from that written patient input submission. We trace how those ideas were used in the protocol, how they were documented in the clinical report, and how they were documented in the pharmacoeconomic report, and then trace how those ideas were involved in the deliberations. So that's kind of highlighted back to the group, as well as if there was anything that could be done differently. So sometimes our feedback would be, if you're going to provide another submission with a survey, can you please tell us when the survey was done, where the respondents came from? Or you know, we might say, can you have a few more quotes to help illustrate the experience? So we've been doing that for a number of years for the Common Drug Review, and as we're looking to do further alignment between our drug processes, this is certainly a kind of a best practice that would be looking to be able to apply to all of our different approaches. So it is, we haven't got a set date that we're going to start doing that, but that's certainly something we're giving serious consideration to, because we've heard over the years how valuable that is for patient groups in the Common Drug Review.
Yeah, well, you did say something, Sarah, during your presentation, that the patient submissions sometimes capture information that is often not included in the design of the clinical trial. So I think that it's really important that when patients are putting together their patient submissions, they're thinking about providing that sort of information. And we could probably, you know, discuss this. This could probably be its own webinar, and we could do that if there was interest from patient organizations to have something like that. I did attend a workshop that CADTH did, I think it was 3 years ago now, and I thought that that really helped me understand what kind of information CADTH was looking for in the patient submissions to help in that decision making. So it is a little 1 minute past 1 now, so I just want to ask for some closing remarks. I have a question that I would like to ask. As we look for moving from involvement towards collaboration with patient advocacy groups, and we'll keep it specific to patient advocacy groups. How does that look like from CADTH's perspective, and how does that look like from INESSS's perspective, and what do we need to have happen for that to come together?
So I've got some thoughts. One is in terms of that, you know, it's respectful engagement, and I feel that we were increasing in terms of our trust building and our respectful engagement, but I think that's still important to always keep in mind and to actively strive for. A second aspect is in terms of, you know, so much of our process has been very passive. We put out a call, or we, you know, issue feedback, but it's very passive in terms of who contributes. So I think it's part of CADTH too, you know, and my team is to be able to be much more active in terms of reaching new groups, different groups or individuals or communities who can offer a different perspective. So that's an element to be able to bring to. I think those are my two kind of key elements to bring.
Yeah, I don't know, many ideas coming in mind. First, opening a dialogue for INESSS. I think just a few years ago, this dialogue was not open, so at least begin to talk to each other. So it's a first start. Respect is always important, and I think it has to be put up front. I hope that this statutory meeting, annual statutory meeting, will help continue or begin and continue this dialogue with patient associations. And also, I think in every project, because every association is different. So Olivier talked about Lyme project here at INESSS, and I would say we started, INESSS started with two strike almost out with the patient association, because the trust wasn't there at the beginning. So we had to first meet them and tell them we are really open to talk to you and listen and learn from what you have to say. Here is what we can share as information. So also, but in with other association, the trust is there at the beginning, because there is no context or a difficult situation that make this difficult from the start. So it's another conversation. So we have to be context specific in that building relationship and based on trust.
Yeah. Olivier, do you want to add something?
No, that's fine.
I do want to point out that when I started working in patient advocacy, there was no engagement with INESSS at all. And it's very positive to see how far we've come along in such a short amount of time. And I think CADTH also, I would be remiss not to mention, you know, how I think CADTH is setting a best practice example in patient engagement in HTA. So because it's 5 minutes past 1 now, I'm just going to close the webinar. I would like to mention that it is a first in a webinar series, so the dates will be announced shortly for the upcoming webinars. And this webinar has been recorded and will be shared on the Cancer Colab website, which is roomc.co. And just thank you again to Isabelle, Olivier, and Sarah for being on the line. Another example of your willingness to engage with stakeholders. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.